Lieutenant Jake Morrison checked his chronometer for the third time in 5 minutes, wondering why mandatory medical screenings always seemed to happen during the most inconvenient parts of his duty rotation. The corridors of the Asclepius hummed with the quiet efficiency of a ship designed for one purpose, keeping the galaxy's various species healthy, whether they wanted to be or not. The medical frigate was a marvel of interspecies cooperation, with sections specifically designed for the physiological needs of dozens of different alien races. Jake had been stationed here for 8 months, and he still got lost trying to find the human-compatible sections. Today's journey to Medical Base 7 had taken him through the Zephyrian wing, where the gravity was slightly lighter, and past the Regelian therapeutic pools, which always made the corridors smell like mint and ozone. Next, called a melodic voice from behind the treatment room door, and Jake stepped inside to find himself face-to-face with Nurse Lyra Kethval. She was Vaelian, her violet-tinged skin catching the medical bay's sterile lighting in a way that made her look like she was carved from precious stone. Her elongated ears twitched slightly as she reviewed his medical file on her tablet, and Jake noticed the slight tremor in her hands that suggested she'd been pulling long shifts. "Lieutenant Morrison," she said without looking up. "Monthly screening, standard immunization updates, and..." She paused, rubbing her eyes. "I'm sorry, what was the third item?" "Reflexology assessment," Jake supplied. "Though honestly, I'm not sure what that involves, and I'm slightly afraid to ask." "It involves me hitting your knee with a small hammer and pretending to be surprised when your leg kicks," Lyra said, finally meeting his eyes. Her irises were the same violet as her skin, with flecks of silver that seemed to shift in the light. Medical science at its finest. Jake laughed. "I feel reassured already." She gestured to the examination table, and Jake settled himself on the slightly too narrow surface while she prepared her instruments. The medical bay was standard Alliance issue, white walls, gleaming surfaces, and enough monitoring equipment to track the vital signs of a small army. "So," Jake said, trying to fill the comfortable silence, "busy week?" "You could say that." Lyra selected an injector from the medical tray, checking its contents against her tablet. "We've had 17 emergency cases from the Kepler station outbreak, 6 food poisoning incidents from the mess hall's experimental Fusion Friday menu, and 1 particularly memorable case involving a Regelian engineer who thought he could improve the ship's artificial gravity by fine-tuning it with a wrench. Did it work? Let's just say we spent 3 hours floating around the engineering deck like very confused balloons." She approached with the injector, her movements automatic and practiced. "This is your standard immunization booster. You might feel a slight pinch." Jake held out his arm, rolling up his sleeve. "I'm pretty good with needles. Had to get about 40 shots before they'd let me serve on an interspecies vessel." "The diplomatic corps takes medical compatibility very seriously," Lyra agreed, pressing the injector to his arm. "Can't have crew members accidentally poisoning their alien colleagues with incompatible pheromones or..." The injector hissed, and Lyra froze. Jake felt the familiar cold sensation of the injection, but something was wrong. Lyra's violet skin had gone pale, her eyes wide with what looked like horror. She stared at the empty injector in her hand as if it had transformed into a venomous snake. "What's wrong?" Jake asked, sitting up straighter. "That wasn't meant for you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What do you mean it wasn't meant for me?" "It's my medical appointment." Lyra set the injector down with shaking hands, then moved quickly to the door. Jake heard the soft beep of the locking mechanism engaging. "Nurse Kethval," he said, a note of concern creeping into his voice, "what exactly did you just inject me with?" She turned back to face him, her expression a mixture of panic and determination. "No one can know," she said, stepping closer to the examination table. "Jake, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What I just gave you, it's not designed for human physiology." "Okay," Jake said slowly, trying to process this information. "So what happens now? Do I grow a second head? Start speaking in tongues? Develop an irresistible urge to reorganize the ship's filing system? Despite her obvious distress, Lyra's mouth quirked upward slightly. "This isn't funny, Jake. The compound I gave you is a Vaelian regenerative serum. It's experimental, highly classified, and completely untested on human subjects." Jake felt a strange tingling sensation beginning to spread from the injection site, like carbonated water flowing through his veins. "Define untested." "As in, we have absolutely no idea what it will do to you," Lyra said, moving to her medical scanner and beginning to calibrate it. "It could enhance your cellular regeneration, it could cause organ failure, or it could turn you into a very attractive purple vegetable. The research is incomplete." "Well," Jake said, trying to keep his voice light as the tingling sensation reached his shoulder, "at least I'd be an attractive vegetable." "That's something." "This is serious," Lyra said, but he could hear the relief in her voice at his calm reaction. "I could lose my medical license. I could be court-martialed. They could ban me from practicing medicine anywhere in Alliance space." Jake studied her face, seeing the genuine fear behind her professional mask. "So why did you lock the door instead of calling for help?" "Because," she said, beginning to scan his vital signs, "if medical command finds out about this, they'll put you in isolation, run every test in the book, and use you as a guinea pig to study the serum's effects. And they'll throw me in prison for criminal negligence. And your solution is to hide me in here until, what? The serum wears off." "I don't know if it wears off," Lyra admitted. "That's part of the problem." Jake considered this, noting that the tingling had now reached his chest and was moving steadily downward. Strangely, he didn't feel alarmed. If anything, he felt more alert and focused than he had in months. "Lyra," he said, using her first name for the first time, "how long do we have before someone notices I'm missing?" She checked her chronometer. "Your duty shift starts in 4 hours. Medical appointments aren't monitored in real time unless there's an emergency signal." "Then we have 4 hours to figure this out," Jake said. "What do you need to know about how this serum is affecting me?" "Everything," she said, her scanner beeping as it recorded his enhanced metabolic readings. "Heart rate, neural activity, cellular regeneration markers, sensory perception changes." "Changes in sensory perception?" Jake asked, just as he became aware that he could hear the conversation happening in the medical bay 3 doors down. Something about a Zephyrian patient who was convinced that the ship's water recycling system was plotting against him. "Oh," he said, blinking. "I think we might want to add enhanced hearing to that list." Lyra looked up from her scanner, her violet eyes reflecting a mixture of scientific fascination and personal concern. "Jake, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Hey," he said, reaching out to touch her hand. "We'll figure this out. Together. But first, you should probably know that I can now hear Chief Petty Officer Williams practicing his opera singing in his quarters, and it's either gotten much better or much worse. I can't tell which." Despite everything, Lyra laughed. "Enhanced auditory perception. That's actually fascinating from a neurological standpoint." "Great," Jake said. "I'm glad my accidental medical experiment is educationally valuable. Now, what else should I be prepared for?" 2 hours into what Jake was beginning to think of as the most interesting medical appointment of his life, he discovered that enhanced hearing was just the beginning. The tingling sensation had spread throughout his entire body, and now every surface he touched seemed to provide detailed information about its composition, temperature, and structural integrity. "This is fascinating," he said, running his fingers along the edge of the examination table. "I can feel the molecular structure of the metal. It's like reading with my fingertips." Lyra looked up from her research tablet, where she'd been frantically searching medical databases for any information about Vaelian serums and human physiology. So far, she'd found exactly nothing helpful, unless you counted the article titled, "Why Interspecies Medical Experimentation is Generally a Bad Idea." Enhanced tactile sensitivity, she noted, adding it to her growing list of Jake's new abilities. The serum is definitely affecting your nervous system in ways we didn't anticipate. The Vaelian Medical Research Council, she said, then immediately looked like she wished she hadn't revealed that information. This serum was developed for Vaelian soldiers who suffer severe injuries in the field. It's supposed to accelerate healing and enhance survival capabilities. And now I'm your unwilling test subject for cross-species compatibility, Jake said. I have to admit, this wasn't how I planned to spend my Tuesday. Jake, I need you to understand how serious this is, Lyra said, though her voice lacked the conviction it had earlier. The serum contains bioactive compounds that could fundamentally alter your physiology. Alter it how, exactly? Jake asked, then paused as he became aware of something unusual. Lyra, are you okay? Your heart rate just spiked. She froze. How could you possibly know that? I can hear it. Feel it. I'm not sure which. Jake frowned, concentrating. It's like I'm aware of your biological functions. Heart rate, breathing pattern, even the electrical activity in your brain. That's impossible, Lyra said, but she was already scanning him again with her medical tricorder. Vaelians don't have bioempathic abilities. Maybe humans process the serum differently than Vaelians do, Jake suggested. Or maybe your researchers missed something. Or maybe, came a voice from the corridor outside, you two should consider opening this door before I have to override the lock. They both froze. The voice belonged to Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sarah Chen, whose reputation for thoroughness was matched only by her ability to sense medical irregularities from 3 decks away. Dr. Chen, Lyra called out, her voice carefully controlled, Lieutenant Morrison is experiencing some unusual side effects from his immunization. I'm monitoring him for adverse reactions. What kind of side effects? Dr. Chen's voice was sharp with professional interest. Jake and Lyra looked at each other. Jake could sense Lyra's panic rising, not just hear it, but actually feel it like a physical presence in the room. Mild dizziness and enhanced sensory perception, Jake called out. Nurse Kethval is being appropriately cautious. Enhanced sensory perception from a standard immunization booster. Dr. Chen sounded skeptical. Open the door, nurse. I want to see his readings. Actually, doctor, Jake said, making a quick decision, I think the issue might be related to my recent participation in the Alliance's experimental sensory training program. There was a pause. What experimental sensory training program? Jake caught Lyra's eye and winked. The classified one, ma'am. I'm not authorized to discuss the details, but I believe the immunization may have interacted with some of the neural modifications from the program. Another pause, longer this time. Lieutenant, are you telling me that Medical Command wasn't informed about your participation in experimental programs before your scheduled immunizations? That would be a question for Command, ma'am. I'm just a communications officer who follows orders and occasionally develops temporarily enhanced hearing. Jake could sense Dr. Chen's frustration through the door, a combination of medical curiosity and bureaucratic annoyance. Very well. Nurse Kethval, continue monitoring the lieutenant. I want a full report on my desk within 6 hours, including any interactions between his training program and standard medical procedures. Yes, doctor, Lyra said, relief evident in her voice. They waited until Dr. Chen's footsteps faded down the corridor before either of them spoke. That was brilliant, Lyra said. And also probably the worst lie I've ever been an accessory to. I prefer to think of it as creative problem-solving, Jake said. Besides, how do we know the Alliance doesn't have experimental sensory training programs? They have experimental everything else programs. Because I would know about any programs that could potentially interact with medical treatments, Lyra said. It's my job to know these things. Well, now you know about one more program than you did this morning, Jake said. Speaking of which, I should probably warn you that I can now hear the conversation happening in the cafeteria. Apparently, the food replicators have achieved sentience and are having philosophical debates about the nature of artificial flavor. Lyra stared at him. You can hear the cafeteria from here. That's 12 decks away. I can also tell that Engineer Martinez is trying to fix the artificial gravity in Section C, and he's getting increasingly frustrated because the gravitational field generators keep playing what sounds like classical Rigelian opera every time he adjusts them. That's actually impossible, Lyra said, but she was looking at her scanner readings with fascination. Your neural activity is off the charts. It's like the serum has created new pathways in your brain. Is that good or bad? I have no idea, she admitted. But it's definitely interesting. Jake, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. How do you feel? Not physically, but mentally. Emotionally. Jake considered the question. Strangely calm, actually. More focused than usual. Like everything is sharper and clearer than it was before. He paused. Why? Because Vaelian regenerative serum is designed to enhance survival instincts and decision-making under pressure. If it's working the same way in human physiology, then I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have in my life, Jake finished. Which explains why I'm not panicking about being accidentally injected with experimental alien medicine. And why you were able to come up with that cover story so quickly, Lyra said. Jake, I think the serum might be making you better. Better how? Better at being human, she said. Enhanced senses, improved cognitive function, faster reflexes. Everything that makes humans good at survival, just amplified. Jake absorbed this information, aware that he was processing it faster and more completely than he would have been able to that morning. So what you're telling me is that your medical mistake might have accidentally improved my entire existence. That's one way to look at it, Lyra said. Though we still don't know about long-term effects, potential side effects, or whether the changes are permanent. And we still need to keep this secret until we figure out what's happening to me, Jake said. Right? Right. Lyra looked at her chronometer. You're due back on duty in 2 hours. Do you think you can handle normal human interaction with enhanced senses and accelerated cognitive processing? Jake grinned. Only one way to find out. But first, we should probably do something about the contaminated medical supplies that are causing the colonial outbreak. Lyra froze. What contaminated medical supplies? The ones I can now detect because of my enhanced senses, Jake said. Lyra, I think your accident might have given us the key to solving a much bigger problem. Jake's enhanced senses had led them to the ship's medical storage bay, where he stood perfectly still, his eyes closed, apparently listening to medicine containers. This is either the most advanced diagnostic technique I've ever witnessed, or you've completely lost your mind, Lyra said, watching him with scientific fascination. Little bit of both, Jake admitted, opening his eyes. But I can detect molecular inconsistencies in the stored pharmaceuticals. There's something wrong with batch 7 alpha of the colonial immunization supplies. Lyra pulled up the storage manifest on her tablet. 7 alpha was distributed to 14 colonies in the Outer Rim 3 weeks ago. That's exactly when the outbreak reports started coming in. The contamination isn't biological, Jake said, moving closer to the storage unit. It's synthetic. Someone deliberately altered the molecular structure of the immunizations. He paused, tilting his head as if listening to something. And whoever did it was very careful to make it look like natural degradation. Jake, what you're describing would require incredibly sophisticated equipment and access to our supply chain, Lyra said. This isn't some random contamination. This is sabotage. Which explains why the standard medical analysis couldn't identify the problem, Jake said. The contamination is designed to be invisible to normal detection methods. Lyra began pulling up shipping records, her violet fingers flying across the tablet interface. If you're right, then someone has been systematically poisoning Alliance medical supplies. But why would anyone? She was interrupted by Jake suddenly reaching out and catching a falling medical scanner that had been knocked off a shelf by the ship's artificial gravity fluctuations. He caught it with impossible precision, his hand moving faster than human reflexes should allow. "Okay," he said, carefully setting the scanner back on the shelf. That was new. "Enhanced reflexes," Lyra noted, adding it to her ever-growing list. "The serum is continuing to affect your nervous system. Is that why I can suddenly detect molecular inconsistencies that your medical equipment can't identify?" "Possibly. Vaelian physiology includes enhanced pattern recognition abilities that help us identify diseases and injuries that might not be obvious to other species." She looked up from her tablet. "Jake, I think the serum isn't just enhancing your human abilities. It's giving you some Vaelian capabilities as well. So I'm becoming part alien?" "More like you're becoming the best of both species," she said, then immediately looked embarrassed by the implication. Jake grinned. "Are you saying I'm an improvement on the original human model?" "I'm saying you're." She paused, her violet skin darkening slightly. "Exceptional." "Exceptionally contaminated with alien medicine," Jake said, but he was smiling. "Exceptionally capable," Lyra corrected. "Jake, with your enhanced abilities, we could trace the contamination back to its source. We could identify whoever is behind this and prevent thousands more deaths. All while keeping your medical mistake a secret," Jake said. "I like it. What do you need me to do? Can you detect which specific pharmaceutical compounds were used to create the contamination?" Jake moved closer to the storage units, his enhanced senses analyzing the molecular signatures of dozens of different medications. Synthetic enzyme inhibitors, manufactured using non-alliance equipment. The molecular structure suggests they were produced in the Rigel system, probably at one of the private pharmaceutical facilities. "Rigel Pharmaceuticals," Lyra said, pulling up corporate records. "They hold contracts for 60% of Outer Rim medical supplies. And they've been submitting bids to expand into core world markets," Jake added, then paused. "How did I know that?" "Enhanced pattern recognition and memory processing," Lyra said. "You're connecting information faster than you would have been able to before. This is either really useful or really scary." "Why not both?" she said, echoing his earlier words. "Jake, if we can prove that Rigel Pharmaceuticals is deliberately contaminating their competitors' products to secure more contracts, we'd be exposing one of the biggest corporate conspiracies in Alliance history," Jake finished. "But we'd also be explaining how I developed these abilities." "About that," Lyra said, moving closer to him. "Your cover story about experimental Alliance training programs was brilliant, but what happens when they want details?" "We give them details," Jake said. "Real ones. About how a dedicated Vaelian nurse accidentally discovered a treatment that could revolutionize human medical capabilities." Lyra stared at him. "You want to tell the truth?" "Part of it. We tell them that you were conducting authorized research into cross-species medical applications, and that the serum administration was a controlled experiment with my full consent." "Jake, that's not what happened." "No, but it's what should have happened," he said. "Lyra, your mistake has given me abilities that could help save lives across the galaxy. Instead of hiding that, we should be celebrating it. You're willing to risk your career to protect mine." "I'm willing to risk my career to advance medical science," Jake said. "And to protect the woman who accidentally made me into a better version of myself." Lyra's violet eyes widened. "Jake. Besides," he said, grinning, "I can now hear Dr. Chen approaching this storage bay, and she's bringing 2 security officers. So we're about to have company whether we want it or not." "What do we tell them?" "The truth," Jake said. "About the contamination, about Rigel Pharmaceuticals, and about how my enhanced abilities helped us identify the problem. And about the serum. We tell them that Nurse Lyra Kethval is a brilliant researcher who developed a breakthrough treatment that could change medicine forever," Jake said. "And that I volunteered to be her first test subject." The storage bay door opened, and Dr. Chen entered with 2 security officers, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Lieutenant Morrison, Nurse HFY," she said. "I understand you've been conducting some unofficial research." "Yes, ma'am," Jake said. "And I believe we've discovered something that could save thousands of lives." Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." Jake looked at Lyra, who nodded slightly. "It started with a medical experiment," he said. "And it led us to uncover the biggest pharmaceutical conspiracy in Alliance history." "And how, exactly, did a medical experiment lead to corporate espionage?" Dr. Chen asked. Jake smiled. "It's a long story, Doctor. But it begins with the best mistake either of us has ever made." As he began to explain their discoveries, Jake realized that he'd never felt more confident, more capable, or more certain that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The serum hadn't just enhanced his abilities, it had enhanced his entire life. And it had brought him closer to the remarkable woman who had accidentally changed everything. The Alliance Medical Command conference room buzzed with activity as Jake finished his testimony to the Joint Investigation Panel. Admiral Torres, head of Medical Division, leaned back in her chair, studying the data tablets spread across the polished table. "Let me see if I understand this correctly, Lieutenant Morrison," she said. "You volunteered for experimental cross-species medical research, which enhanced your sensory capabilities, which in turn allowed you to detect molecular-level contamination that our standard equipment missed, which led to the discovery of a massive pharmaceutical conspiracy." "That's an accurate summary, ma'am," Jake said, grateful that his enhanced cognitive abilities were helping him navigate the complex political implications of their situation. "And Nurse HFY," Admiral Torres continued, turning to Lyra, "you developed this experimental serum as part of your advanced research into interspecies medical applications." "Yes, ma'am," Lyra said, her voice steady despite what Jake could sense was considerable nervousness. "The serum was designed to enhance human survival capabilities by incorporating beneficial aspects of Vaelian physiology." Without proper authorization or oversight, Dr. Chen added, though her tone suggested professional interest rather than condemnation. "The research was conducted within established parameters for experimental medicine," Lyra replied. "Lieutenant Morrison provided full informed consent, and all safety protocols were observed." Jake had to admire her ability to make their accidental encounter sound like a carefully planned scientific breakthrough. The truth was more complicated, but the results spoke for themselves. "The contamination analysis is remarkable," said Dr. Yamazaki from the Pharmaceutical Crimes Division. "Lieutenant Morrison was able to identify synthetic compounds that our best detection equipment couldn't trace. The evidence against Rigel Pharmaceuticals is overwhelming. 17 colonies affected, over 3,000 people sickened, and a conspiracy that reaches to the highest levels of one of our major suppliers," Admiral Torres said. "If Lieutenant Morrison's abilities hadn't identified the contamination source, we could have been looking at a sector-wide health crisis." "More than that," Jake said. "The contamination was designed to worsen over time. Within another month, the affected medications would have been completely ineffective. Entire colonies would have been left without medical protection." "And you detected all of this through enhanced sensory perception?" Dr. Chen asked. "Enhanced sensory perception, improved pattern recognition, and accelerated cognitive processing," Jake confirmed. "The serum seems to have given me the ability to analyze biological and chemical signatures at a molecular level." "Fascinating," murmured Dr. Yamazaki. "And these enhancements are permanent?" Jake and Lyra exchanged glances. The truth was, they still didn't know the full extent or duration of the serum's effects. Jake's abilities had continued to develop over the past week, stabilizing at levels that were remarkable but not overwhelming. "All indications suggest the changes are permanent," Lyra said. "Lieutenant Morrison's enhanced capabilities show no signs of degradation. Which brings us to the question of what to do with you two," Admiral Torres said. "Nurse HFY, your research has produced results that could revolutionize interspecies medicine. However, your methods were unorthodox." "I understand, ma'am," Lyra said. Which is why I'm assigning you to the Advanced Medical Research Division, the Admiral continued. With full authorization to continue your work on cross-species enhancement serums, under proper oversight this time. Lyra's violet skin brightened with surprise and relief. Thank you, ma'am. And Lieutenant Morrison, Admiral Torres turned to Jake, your enhanced abilities make you invaluable for medical investigation and analysis. How would you feel about a transfer to medical division as a specialist consultant? Jake felt a surge of excitement that had nothing to do with the serum's effects. I'd be honored, ma'am. Excellent. Dar. Chen will coordinate your new assignments. You'll both be based on the research vessel Hippocrates, where you can continue to work together on medical advancement projects. As the meeting concluded and the various officers filed out, Jake found himself alone with Lyra in the corridor outside the conference room. So, he said, that went better than expected. We're both lucky to still have careers, Lyra said, but she was smiling. Though I have to say, your ability to make my mistakes sound like brilliant scientific planning was impressive. It wasn't a mistake, Jake said. Maybe the injection was accidental, but everything that followed was a choice. You chose to help me, to trust me, to work with me to solve the contamination crisis. And you chose to protect me, to support my research, and to risk your career for the sake of scientific advancement, she replied. They walked together through the corridors of the medical station, past laboratories and treatment facilities where the work of healing continued across species barriers. Jake, Lyra said as they approached the docking bay where the Hippocrates waited, there's something I need to tell you. What's that? The night I gave you that injection. I wasn't looking for the medical bay. Jake stopped walking. What do you mean? I mean I knew exactly where the medical bay was, she said, her violet skin darkening with embarrassment. I was looking for you. I'd been watching you during your off-duty hours, seeing how you interacted with the different species on the ship, how you treated everyone with respect and kindness regardless of their physiology. So the wrong injection was completely accidental, she said quickly. But ending up in your examination room wasn't. Jake processed this information, his enhanced cognitive abilities working through the implications. So you were interested in me before you accidentally turned me into a human Vaelian hybrid? I was interested in you because you were kind, intelligent, and genuinely curious about other species, Lyra said. The fact that you're now also capable of molecular-level biological analysis is just a bonus. A very attractive bonus, Jake said, grinning. Though I have to say, your bedside manner could use some work. Most nurses don't accidentally give their patients experimental alien serums. Most patients don't volunteer to cover up medical mistakes by claiming to be part of secret alliance training programs, she countered. Fair point. Jake looked through the docking bay viewport at the sleek lines of the Hippocrates. So what happens now? Do we pretend this was all professional medical research, or do we admit that it started with you having a crush on the communications officer? I prefer to think of it as scientific curiosity about human behavior, Lyra said primly. Right. Very scientific. Tell me, was it also scientific curiosity that made you lock the medical bay door instead of calling for help? That was panic, she admitted. Though it turned out to be the right decision for completely the wrong reasons. Jake turned to face her fully, noting how the station's lighting brought out the silver flecks in her violet eyes. Lyra, I need you to know something. The serum didn't just enhance my physical abilities. It made me more aware of emotions, both mine and other people's. And what I'm aware of right now is that I care about you. A lot. Not because of the serum, but in spite of it. Jake. I'm saying this badly, he continued, but what I mean is that even if the serum wore off tomorrow and I went back to being a completely ordinary human, I'd still want to work with you, spend time with you, and see where this, whatever this is, leads. Lyra reached out and took his hand, her touch warm against his enhanced skin. The serum isn't going to wear off, Jake. My research suggests the cellular changes are permanent. Good, he said. Because I like being able to sense how you're feeling right now. And how am I feeling? Happy, Jake said. Relieved. Excited about our new assignment. And... He paused, his enhanced perception picking up subtler emotional currents. Hopeful about what comes next. Very perceptive, she said, moving closer to him. Though you don't need enhanced senses to figure out that I'm interested in you. No, but they don't hurt, Jake said. Though I should probably warn you that my enhanced hearing means I can tell that Captain Rodriguez is approaching the docking bay, and he sounds like he's in a hurry. How much time do we have? About 30 seconds. Then I should probably do this quickly, Lyra said, and kissed him. It was a brief kiss, but Jake's enhanced senses made it feel like the most intense experience of his life. He could feel her heartbeat, sense the warmth of her skin, and detect the subtle pheromones that indicated Vaelian attraction and affection. Wow, he said when they separated. That was enhanced. Perfect, Jake said. Completely perfect. Captain Rodriguez appeared in the docking bay entrance, tablet in hand and expression focused. Dr. Kethval, Lieutenant Morrison. Ready for departure? Yes, sir, they said in unison. As they boarded the Hippocrates, Jake realized that his life had been completely transformed by a simple mistake. He'd started the week as a lonely communications officer with insomnia and ended it as an enhanced human with unprecedented abilities and a brilliant Vaelian partner who understood him better than anyone ever had. So, Lyra said as they found their quarters aboard the research vessel, any regrets about volunteering for my experimental treatment? Jake looked around at their new ship, thought about the adventures that awaited them among the stars, and considered the remarkable woman who had accidentally changed everything about his existence. Only one, he said. What's that? I wish you'd given me the wrong injection sooner. Lyra laughed, the sound filling their shared workspace with warmth and possibility. Well, Dr. Morrison, she said, using his new title, we have the rest of our careers to perfect the technique. Dr. Morrison. The research position comes with an automatic promotion. Congratulations, you're now a doctor of xenobiology by practical experience. Jake grinned, settling into his new role as easily as he'd accepted his enhanced abilities. In that case, Dr. Kethval, I think our first research project should be investigating the long-term effects of accidental romantic attachment between research partners. That could take decades to study properly, she said, her violet eyes sparkling with amusement. I'm counting on it, Jake replied, pulling her closer as their ship prepared to jump to hyperspace. After all, the best discoveries are always the ones you never see coming. Outside their viewport, the stars shifted into the familiar blue-white streaks of faster-than-light travel, carrying them toward new worlds, new mysteries, and a future that had begun with the best mistake either of them had ever made.